The June 30th, 2021 meeting of the Woodbridge Township Board of Education will please come to order. Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Delapietro.
Here.
Mr. Harris.
Here.
Mr. Sedana.
Here.
Mr. Treebwasser.
Here.
Mr. Velez.
Here.
Ms. Anderson.
Here. Mr. Secretary, as required by the Sunshine Law, please read the notice of meetings.
Thank you, Madam President. The New Jersey Open Public Meetings Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meetings of public bodies at which any business affecting their interest is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of this Act, the Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published by having the date, time, and place thereof posted as follows. January 11th, 2021, emailed to the Home News Tribune, the Star Ledger, and the Municipal Clerk's Office, posted in Ross Street, School Number 11, and the Board of Education Administration Building, also published on the school district website.
Mr. Velez, please read the closed session statement.
Thank you, Madam President. I would like to motion for the approval of the following closed session statement. In compliance with the Sunshine Law, the Board must go into closed session in order to discuss subjects exempted from the public portion of our meeting. The discussions to be held in closed session will be regarding personnel matters. Any information regarding closed session discussion will be released to the public when the reason for discussing these matters in closed session no longer exists.
I have a motion by Mr. Velez, seconded by Mr. Treebwasser. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Please rise for the salute to the flag and a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Do I have a motion to reconvene?
So motion. Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Treebwasser, seconded by Mr. Delapietro. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Bourdain?
Here.
Mr. Delapietro?
Here.
Mr. Harris?
Here.
Mr. Sedana?
Here.
Mr. Tamburello?
Here.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Here.
Mr. Velez?
Here.
Ms. Anderson.
Here. Mr. Secretary, please state for the record any notices of bids received by the board.
Thank you, Madam President. On June 18th, 2021, we opened IFB 22-14 for HVAC system preventative maintenance and repair. And on June 22nd, 2021, we opened IFB 22-01/COL, athletic team supplies and equipment.
Thank you. The public is invited to speak at the conclusion of each agenda. Comments at this time should be limited to items on the agenda being presented. When you come to the microphone, please provide your name and the section of the township in which you reside. As per Regulation 1100D, comments must be limited to no more than 5 minutes. No response will be given until you have completed your opportunity to speak. Mr. Secretary, do you have any recommendations on behalf of the superintendent?
On behalf of the superintendent, I have 10 items to present to the board.
Do I have a motion for the superintendent's agenda?
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Treebwasser, seconded by Mr. Delapietro. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Are there any comments or questions from the public? Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Bourdain?
Yes.
Mr. Delapietro?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Ms. Anderson.
Yes. Curriculum Committee, Curriculum Agenda, Mr. Treebwasser.
Thank you, Madam President. The Curriculum Committee, on recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, presents the following 19 items. I move for the adoption of the foregoing.
I have a motion by Mr. Treebwasser,
Second.
seconded by Ms. Bourdain. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Are there any comments or questions from the public? Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Bourdain?
Yes.
Mr. Delapietro?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Ms. Anderson.
Yes. Finance and Insurance, Mr. Tamburello.
Thank you, Madam President. Finance and Insurance Committee, on recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and the Business Administrator Board Secretary, presents the following 5 items. This evening, I move for the adoption of the foregoing 5 items.
I have a motion by Mr. Tamburello,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Delapietro. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Are there any comments or questions from the public? Roll call, Mr. Secretary?
Ms. Bourdain?
Yes.
Mr. Delapietro?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes. Athletics and extracurricular agenda, Mr. Harris.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. The Athletics and Extracurricular Committee, on recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, presents the following 12 items. I move for the adoption of the foregoing.
I have a motion by Mr. Harris,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Treebwasser. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Are there any comments or questions from the public? Roll call, Mr. Secretary?
Ms. Bourdain?
Yes.
Mr. Delapietro?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes. Buildings and Grounds, Mr. Harris.
Thank you, Madam President. The Buildings and Grounds Committee, on recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and a Business Administrator, present the following 6 items. I move for the adoption of the foregoing.
I have a motion by Mr. Harris,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Delapietro. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Are there any comments and questions from the public? Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Bourdain?
Yes.
Mr. Delapietro?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes. Equity Commission, Mr. Treebwasser.
Thank you, Madam President. The Equity Commission Committee, on recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, presents the following one item. I move for the adoption of the foregoing.
I have a motion by Mr. Treebwasser,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Delapietro. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Are there any comments or questions from the public? Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Bourdain?
Yes.
Mr. Delapietro?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes. Personnel Agenda, Mr. Tamburello.
Thank you, Madam President. The Personnel Committee, on recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and the Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources, presents the following 25 items. This evening, I move for the adoption of the foregoing 25 items.
I have a motion by Mr. Tamburello,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Delapietro. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Are there any comments or questions from the public? Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Bourdain?
Yes.
Mr. Delapietro?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser?
I will abstain on the name Linda Treebwasser on item number 6, yes on all other items.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes. Mr. Bush, do you have any recommendations?
I do at this time, Madam President. I'm going to present a possible motion for board members' consideration, but just remember, please, for board members who have a conflict of interest, if you could abstain on this matter, and only the board members who do not have a conflict should participate. That's my advice. Resolved that the board hereby approves the addendum to agreement and promissory note between Dr. Robert Zaga and the board, which addendum modifies and becomes part of the agreement in accordance with NJSA 18A 28-6 between the parties, dated February 18th, 2021. Be it further resolved that the board president is authorized to sign the said addendum on behalf of the board, and that the incoming superintendent and the school business administrator are directed to undertake and implement the terms and conditions of both the agreement and the addendum as set forth therein, subject to execution of the addendum by Dr. Zaga, and to provide a true original signature copy of the fully executed addendum to Dr. Zaga.
Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
You need a motion, and then you need a second.
Oh,
Sorry.
that's okay.
Is there-
Motion?
Can I have a motion? I have a motion by Mr. Tamburello,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Sedana.
Ms. Bourdain?
No.
Mr. Delapietro?
I'll abstain.
Mr. Harris?
Abstain as well.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Abstain.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes. Is there any old business that should be brought to the attention of the board? Is there any new business that should be brought to the attention of the board?
Madam President?
Mr. Tamburello.
Thank you. This evening, if anybody doesn't know, is Dr. Zega's final day as superintendent, and I know a few board members had some things to say about his tenure at the last meeting. I'd like to speak about the time that Dr. Zega came into this district as superintendent. I choose to remember that time. It was a dark period in local education. I'm sure all of us remember we were coming out of some testing scandals. Some of you may not remember, these meetings every month had journalists and reporters here looking for stories on discipline and punishment and trying to drum up public interest because, you know, it was a dark period in local education. Furthermore, we had state investigators in our schools at the time harassing our employees, trying to get to the bottom of what anybody knew about techniques and strategies for cheating on tests. And that's the period of time that Dr. Zega came into this district as superintendent. And by most accounts, and I dare say maybe by all accounts, the term I heard most after those ensuing years, after those times, was that he righted the ship, quite frankly. That was 8, 9 years ago that he came in under some stressful conditions. I believe he righted the ship then, and it brings us to today. You can fast forward. His last day as superintendent, it was another, wasn't a scandal, but it was a global issue that impacted this district over the last 14 or 15 months. You know, obviously, it impacted the entire world. But here he was tasked to lead this district through the pandemic, through remote learning, through hybrid learning, and all the things, along with the board and his team. So I choose to think about those two periods, when he came in and as he's leaving. And I think he was the consummate professional. He had a work ethic. I worked with him for 2 years as board president, and for every day of his tenure as a board member, I worked with him, and I could vouch to his work ethic, his professionalism. I was proud to work with him. I'm proud of the things I did with him, that we've done with him. I wish him Godspeed and all the best of luck in his new position. And those are the things I'd like to say about Dr. Zega this evening. So thank you, Madam President, for the time. And again, good luck and Godspeed, Dr. Zega. Thank you.
Sure.
Madam President?
Mr. Harris.
All right, thank you very much. I had a few just new items I wanted to just recognize. They're not necessarily new to us, with the exception of one. The Woodbridge has announced a summer meals program. I know this is something we've talked about numerous times, Mr. Treeboss in particular, very familiar with it. It's something we've been doing year long, but will now extend into the summer. The district, through federal reimbursement, will be offering a summer meals program free to all individuals under the age of 18. You could pick up meals in the morning between the hours of 8 a.m. and 11 a.m. They will be available at the following schools. This is all on our website as well, obviously, if you don't catch it, but I just inform you to go and take a look at it if you are interested in participating. It's at JFK High School, Colonia High School, Woodbridge Middle School, Port Reading School number 9, Ross Street School number 11, this school right here, Ford Avenue School number 14, and Matthew Jago School number 28 in Seawarren. Those schools between the hours of 8 a.m. and 11 a.m. every morning, Monday through Friday during the summer months, will offer free summer meals similar to what we've become accustomed to this past year during the pandemic. Nextly, the Summer Bridge program. This is the school district's second summer in a row in which we're offering a virtual, online, volunteer-only summer enrichment program in the areas of math and language arts, free and available to all students, grades 1 through 12. The program officially begins July 6th, running through July the 30th. It's recommended, not mandatory, that your child or you as parents consider your child spending 5 days a week, up to 30 minutes each in each of those two subject areas. The material that will be covered in math and language arts will be a review of of what they learned this past school year, as well as a preview of next year's curriculum content. So I would encourage parents and students to take advantage of this free program that your tax dollars are paying for. If you are an elementary school parent, you're not familiar, you're looking for your password, things of that nature, please contact Mr. Kendall Ali. The following phone number, again, this is all on the website, similar to the summer meals program. Mr. Kendall Ali at 732-602-8565. He's the administrator or coordinator of this program this summer. Or if you are a middle school or high school student, please contact your building principal, as our high school and middle school principals are full-time throughout the summer months. You can contact them there. And last but not least, I promise, this is a recent law that was signed, as I think we all know in this room and members of the Woodbridge Township public. Yesterday, Governor Phil Murphy was right here at School 11 signing the state budget. He signed 11 other bills in that package, and one of them is education-related that I wanted to just touch on real quick. It was sponsored by our speaker and our state representative, Craig Coughlin. It's called the New Jersey College Affordability Act. And what I wanted to highlight is for young parents or parents of teenagers, if you have a 529 program, it's a college savings account through the state of New Jersey. The state of New Jersey has a program called NJ Best. You can learn more about it at njbest.com. It's the state's 529 college savings plan. If you make contributions to that, the first $10,000 in contributions will now be tax deductible. So that's for households with incomes under $200,000 per year. Again, you make contributions to that 529, the NJ Best 529 plan. The first $10,000 per child that you have an account for, that will be deductible from your state income taxes. And that's an ongoing program. And then if for lower income families with a family household income under $75,000, the deduction will also apply up to $10,000. But for those families, the first $750 you contribute will be matched dollar for dollar from the state of New Jersey on just a one-time basis. So I think that's a fantastic program. As we all know, as young people or parents up here, the college education is very, very expensive. Giving our parents a tool of encouraging savings and rewarding that savings for college, I think is a fantastic idea. And I would encourage anybody, whether you have a child who's 3 years old or 15 years old, it's never a bad time to start saving for college. And now there's a great incentive to do so. So thank you, Madam President, for the opportunity.
Sure. We will now open the meeting for public comment. When you come to the microphone, please provide your name and the section of the township in which you reside. As per Regulation 1100D, comments must be limited to no more than 5 minutes. No response will be given until you have completed your opportunity to speak. For those residents unable to attend tonight's meeting in person, you may email your comments to superintendent@woodbridge.k12.nj.us. Mr. Secretary, do we have any emails received by the public regarding tonight's meeting?
Madam President, we do not.
Okay. With that being said, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
I have a motion by Mr. Treebwasser,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Delapietro. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried.